next speaker is Captain Chidi Nwanu. I said earlier that he's a British Army officer. He's a reserve officer now, but he's still very vibrant as he still consults here and there. I hope Chidi is on. It's your turn.
Good morning. I hope you can hear me.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction. As the professor said, my name is Chidi Nwanu, and as my name would indicate, I'm a Nigerian, and I serve in the British Army Reserve. So I'm going to give a very brief presentation. Sorry, just to backtrack, I'd like to obviously extend my greetings to everybody in the hall and stand on all previous protocol. I'm going to try and share my screen. This hopefully will be successful. So I'm not necessarily the best with these things. Okay, can everybody see that? Oh, you still see me?
Yeah, we can now.
Okay, can you see my presentation or are you seeing me? Let me see. I'm going to try that again. Sorry, I wasn't sure if you could see my screen. So, Prof, could you tell me if you can see my presentation?
Yeah, we can.
You can? Okay, that's great. Okay, so let me just quickly roll in through this. So I'm just going to give you a brief background about myself. Obviously, as I said, I grew up in Nigeria and I joined the British Army Reserve when I came here for university. And as a result, I deployed twice to Iraq and Afghanistan. And I'm going to try and contrast some of my experiences there and just 5 very quick lessons that maybe we can use to understand how Nigeria can look at its own situation. So the first thing is to understand the terrain. So I'm going to say when I deployed to Iraq, it was in 2004. This was at the beginning of just after the invasion and just before the insurgency started in the main. Now, when we trained for it, we're training in December of, in the last 3 months of 2003, from October to December. So it was winter in the United Kingdom, it was very cold, and we're training, and it was a joke amongst ourselves that we're training to go to the desert and, it's so freezing cold. When we actually arrived in Iraq, it was freezing cold. It was raining, it was sleety, it was like 2 degrees in the desert, it was snowing. We had no idea that, actually it snowed in the desert. That's just one thing about not understanding the terrain, the physical terrain. When we went to Afghanistan, so these pictures are all from Afghanistan. Again, we were expecting to go into a desert. So, if you can imagine, I expected it all to look more like this, with mountains. Sorry, let me go back. With mountains and deserts and all of this kind of stuff. But when we went there, there's next to the Helmand River, there's a place called the Green Zone, which is irrigated. There was an American irrigation scheme in the 50s that created this huge irrigated place. So in essence, it's almost like a jungle. You can see how close the terrain is. We didn't understand the terrain. So, you could see this young fellow here going out in his t-shirt and, his desert camouflage, meaning that you stood out in the green environment. You would change from, and the transition was very sudden. You go from desert straight into the green zone. So it is key that we understand the terrain. And in Nigeria in itself, I speak as a Southern Nigerian. Before I ever went to the North for the first time, I thought that all of the North was just, a desert. There wasn't much there. And when I went there, I saw the huge diversity in terms of terrain, the hills, the mountains, the forests. Without understanding how terrain influences, conflict, you will not win that conflict. And we have the same thing here in Nigeria where, people like myself will think that Borno State is, a desert, but in fact, you've got swamps, you've got rivers, you've got forests. You need to understand the physical terrain. The second point is to really, really understand the human terrain. So again, I will go back to the example of Iraq. What we knew about Iraq when we deployed was that, Iraq was an Islamic country. People there were Muslims. We knew there was Sunni, there was Shia. But when I went there was a huge diversity. There were Christians, there were Muslims, there were Sunni, Shia, Zoroastrians, Yazidis, people whose their religions dated back to before, the Bible or the Quran. A huge diversity of people. There were fair-haired people, blonde hair, blue eyes, red hair. You could see there were black people, black Africans. There was a huge diversity, and these are black Iraqis, not African immigrants. These are Iraqis. You can see there were the kids. There were different. There were Kurds, Arabs, Turkmen. Completely a huge diversity. Likewise, it wasn't just, as I said before, a desert. You had like archaeological monuments going back. This is in Ur, where Noah was. This is going back to old religions. You had slums, you had cities, completely different environment. So without understanding, an area, to understand that, people are not just a monolith, especially in terms of an insurgency encounter and violent extremism, it's going to be very, very difficult for somebody to be able to defeat or to counter that insurgency. So again, we're coming back to Nigeria, coming back to what we're looking at in terms of violence in Borno State or up in the north or the northwest. Borno State is more diverse than, I would say, the southeast or the eastern of Nigeria. You've got the Kanuri, you've got the Shua Arabs, you've got the Fulani, you've got the Margi, you've got a huge variety of people, all of whom come to this conflict with their own motivations, with their own questions. We need to ask ourselves, why are Bagumi fishermen part of Boko Haram? What's their motivation? Why is Boko Haram able to move so freely in the Goza Mountains when other people find it difficult? What's going on there? Without understanding human terrain, you will never be able to defeat an insurgency. The second point is logistics. So, if this building here over on the right is our compound. It was the compound where we stayed, and essentially in front of it was, again, woods, trees, and then the Taliban. It was so essentially for that little piece of Helmand province, that was like the furthest point that we'd got to. And behind us was a logistic chain going from that compound back to a fob, which was in another compound, going back to Kambastion, which was in the desert in Helmand, going back through Pakistan, all the way back to the United Kingdom, a huge logistic chain. Now, this compound, the only way you could get to it was either walking through the bush or going along a small dirt track. And then the Taliban put so many IEDs on that track that we couldn't get any vehicles down. So anytime we needed resupply, we had to walk back through the bush to our compounds, put everything in our backpacks, and then walk back. But in that little compound, we never ran out of ammunition. We never ran out of food. We never ran out of water. We always knew if we got injured, somebody was going to come and pick us up. We knew that if we were going to be overrun, somebody would come and fight to us, or they would bring in something that would rescue us. This is the importance of logistics. It's not just bombs, bullets, water. It is the confidence that it gives soldiers that whatever you do, whatever is going to happen, somebody is looking after you. And we cannot understate the importance of logistics. And I speak again as a soldier with all the arrogance of an infantryman. We look down on logisticians. We think, these guys are just sitting at the back counting blankets. But without logistics, you will never fight a war. Can we say now that Nigeria has good logistics in any of its conflicts? We have the same problems going back to the civil war of poor logistics, all the way through to Ekomog, and right now to what's going on in the north. I'll keep referring to Boko Haram because maybe that's the most obvious conflict. We keep hearing the allegations of soldiers running out of ammunition. Soldiers, we see videos of soldiers drinking dirty water. I myself have seen how soldiers are resupplied up north with, taking pure water sachets and all of this kind of stuff, driving up and down in trucks. The importance of logistics, again, I would say cannot be understated. And as I said, it's without that confidence that it gave us that it doesn't matter what happens, someone is going to come and get us, or somebody will get something to us, gives you that motivation to fight, and gives you that belief that, you're fighting, that even if whatever you think or you believe about what you're fighting for, that at least you're fighting as part of something, as a unit. So the next point is terrain. Terrain dictates tactics. Now this, this is going to be important again in terms of, comparing it again to the conflict up north. So I've described how, Afghanistan, in Helmand province, you go from the deserts, like, around here, to the green zone where it's waterways, channels, grass and corn and other things that is as tall as a human being. You'll go from deserts where it's open, you can move about, you can maneuver, you can see all around, you've got good visibility, to almost jungle warfare where you've got to keep, close, you've got to, you won't see the enemy until they're maybe 5 meters in front of you. So you can't fight the same way in two different environments. You can't take one set of rules and then apply it in the same situation over and over and over again. Now, after 2007, 2008, the Taliban learned that they were not going to win against us, in a straight fight. So they started using IEDs. So you can see now in this picture here, you can see the soldiers, even though this is open ground where you could actually spread out. Normally as an infantryman, you want to spread out because that limits the effect of machine guns, artillery, etc. But you can see them walking in a line. This is because of IEDs. They're staying in what's called the IED lane. So the guy in front will be checking for IEDs, will be using a detector to make sure there's no IEDs. The terrain, the physical terrain and the human terrain, as in the human terrain that the enemy dictates, forces you to fight in a certain way. Now, when we bring this back to, Nigeria, looking at how we fight, the Nigerian army is still structured the way it was when it was designed, as in 1950s kind of force with a divisions, that controls brigades, that controls battalions, that has a brigade and division organization that, controls the logistics, has a different supply and transport. It is brutally, to be brutal, it's archaic. It's a system that is not functional for what we've got now. We're fighting light, highly mobile forces who are relatively well armed, but they're very mobile. And you're trying to use tanks, to fight against people on motorcycles. It's illogical. If I can hear a tank coming from miles away, I just jump on my motorcycle and disappear. Or I lay an IED in the only place you can go because the terrain it doesn't favor tanks. So the lessons that we should learn from that are that we can't continue using the same thing or doing the same thing over and over again and expecting success. We can't take the same tactics that have been put aside, that when they were given to us. I mean, the people that gave them to us, the British in the 50s, no longer use the same kind of organizational structure that we use. We can't talk about attritional warfare, maneuverist warfare, when we don't empower captains or lieutenants to take decisions that, that will be best for their units. So the importance of understanding the terrain and the type of conflict, can't be overstated. And finally, there's never ever a military solution to any sort of an insurgency or conflict. Every single conflict, ends in discussion. Even those conflicts where there's a comprehensive military defeat. So Germany in 1945 was comprehensively defeated by the Soviet Union and by Britain, America, and France. They still sat down, wrote out a piece of paper to say, yes, we have surrendered, we agree, here you go. Nigerian Civil War, Biafra was comprehensively defeated by the Nigerian army or by the Federal Army. At the end of the day, they still sat down and wrote out an article of surrender. And even though there was no dispute that, Biafra had been defeated, they still sat down to write out a piece of paper. The same thing applies to what's going on in the Northeast. The military can only create the conditions whereby a force will come to the negotiating table. But there will never be such a thing as a comprehensive defeat without that backup of governance and a civil military kind of cooperation to bring the conflict to a close. So just to round up, and in conclusion, it's very important to understand the physical terrain and then to really understand the terrain. And when I say that, I mean the human terrain. The people are the key to every insurgency and to every kind of extremist situation. Without logistics, you're not going to function. You'll just stagnate. And terrain will always dictate how you fight. But most importantly, without there being a civilian solution, a political, cultural, social solution, all of these come into it. And I think previous speakers have spoken very eloquently on this. The military is only there to create the conditions where you can fulfill all of these. You can bring all of these to bear. So I apologize, I've gone slightly over time, but thank you. And if there's any questions, please put them in the chat.
Thank you very much. Chidi. We are just going to take one quick question before the last speaker speaks, and that question is addressed to General Dambazao. The question is, someone is asking whether the counterinsurgency effort in Nigeria has not been so long drawn because there is so much sabotage, because it appears the military that we have, based on its track record, should have decisively put an end to the insurgency.
La 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 la.